Today I have another drywall patch. This one is in the wall. I also paint this one. I 95% of the time do not paint, but he said he had the paint and he just really was kind of in a pinch and needed it done. So I just trying to be nice, I said I would. But I don't like to paint because paint never matches. Even if you go to Home Depot and do the little laser match thing, it doesn't match. This paint didn't match. It was a shade off. It's not my problem though. Ideally, you want to get a painter to paint the whole wall. That's really the best way to do it. That's why I don't paint. So this is a drywall patch on the wall. This job paid $455. There's two larger patches that I show you today, and then all throughout the house there was maybe 6 or 7 sizes like this. I did not show you those. This job took 5 hours to complete. Again, $455. I had all the material, however, probably $15 of material. So we're looking at around $90 an hour, right? Pretty good. Change your mindset how money works. I do this full time and I make $80 to $100 an hour doing drywall. It's not just drywall though. You can do anything, any hobby, anything you want and make full-time income, that much or even more. Nothing's stopping you. I make a lot of drywall videos, but I have made other videos about how to make money other ways. Comment about something your hobby is or something you're into, and I'll show you step for step how to make that much money or more from it. If you're not making $150,000 to $200,000 a year, you're doing it wrong. If you're going to your job and getting 20 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour, you're doing it wrong. If you're getting minimum wage, you're doing it wrong. If you're getting 55 salary, you're doing it wrong. Money isn't real. Money is a made-up concept. Take as much as you want, because literally it's that easy. I don't take advantage of people. These are the going rates for drywall repairs. Same thing for you. Anything you want to do, you can make tons and tons and tons of money. Change your mindset. Let's get right into this. It's pretty cool. This one I don't time lapse. It's just the straight video, so it may be a little long, but it's the actual time it takes besides dry time to do a patch. See you next video.
All right, this is the first patch of today. Again, I am not doing any time lapse of this. This is the actual time it takes to do it and figure it out. Here, this hole was this size when I came into it. I could have done 2 things to cut out. In this, I chose to cut out a square and then I marked it on the wall. However, I could have just cut a hole in the wall and then measured it and then cut the drywall. So you don't have to cut a shape and then mark it on the wall. I just found in this case it was the easiest. Before cutting into the drywall, first you want to know what's behind the wall so you don't accidentally cut an electrical line or a water line. That would be a nightmare situation for a small patch. Can you imagine if you hit a water line and you're just there for a small patch? It would be a nightmare. Secondly, you want to find the joists or the wood of it. You see my pencil line there on the left of my router? So I marked it too large because I want to hit the joist. So if I don't have to add backing, even better. So that's kind of what I did there. So not the joist, the stud there. So basically what I want to do, a stud is 2x4, so it's 1.5 inches wide. And so I want to split the difference, so each side is basically 3/4 of an inch, so a screw can be screwed to the new piece of drywall and the old existing drywall. That way the new piece has something to screw to, and the old one also does, so everything is nice and tight, and there's no cracking. Here I'm just cutting, I'm using my oscillator tool to cut the baseboard down so I can get the new piece of drywall added. This video, I'm not really cutting any kind of slow points out of the video or speeding anything up because I really want you to understand the amount of time it takes and honestly how short of time a patch like this can take. So yes, I could have speeded this up, I could have cut it out because, you know, I'm obviously struggling a little bit getting this thing out. But, you know, who cares? It's just the point is we're trying to cut it a nice square so we can show you. If you remember, I cut the piece just a little too big. You can still see the pencil mark on the wall there. So, but I was trying to meet up with the stud, so I just need to cut my piece down just a little bit, and I did that off camera. And this one actually is a pretty tight fit. However, it just doesn't need to be. Even if there was large holes or gaps between the new and old piece, it's okay because pre-fill is going to handle that. So here we're obviously adding the screws. The point is to get it into the wood. As much meat as you can screw into the new piece of drywall, the better. You don't want to do it on the complete edge. However, if that's all you have to work with, just do extra in that area. I like to do screws again on either side of the drywall, the new piece and the old piece. That way they're both firmly against the wall. I honestly don't know if there's some standard on how many screws you should do per repair. I know there's standards on new hang how many screws to do, but on a repair, I mean, just put plenty on there because it just helps prevent cracking. Next, we're going to prep for pre-fill. Do you see on the top there of the piece of drywall that kind of ruffled piece of paper? That is a great example of the prep we're trying to do. So we're cutting that off. Really, with all repairs, pretty much every edge, I'm going to take a small triangle out so it's a nice clean cut. If I wouldn't have cut that top piece off with the first one I did and just mudded over it, the mud would have stuck out above the wall, and then when I was a couple layers deep with the mud, it would have been a 1/4 inch out of the wall, and you would have seen that bump for sure. So prep before pre-fill really helps it to hide these seams when it comes to the final product. It really is. You need to take as much time as you can to make this as beautiful and flat as you can get it. I like to take my hand and just feel every seam, and you don't want to feel anything sticking out, any ruffles, anything. Say I'm banging the back of the knife on the wall, you can bang any ruffles inside, and that also accomplishes it. Here we have our second repair. This is just right next to the other one. I do the exact same process. I just wanted to show you two kind of for repetitiveness. But this one is very similar. Here I'm just kind of cutting the damage out so I can see behind the wall to see what I'm working with. Now that I can see behind the wall, I can get my hand in there and feel around. I can see if there's any electrical lines, water lines, and where the studs are. So basically what I'm doing here now is I'm going to take a tape measure and measure stud to stud to see how large I should cut my next patch. This new piece I cut 16.5 by 16.5, and then I'm tracing it on the wall. And again, you don't have to do this. You don't have to trace it on the wall. You could have just taken your knife, cut out any size hole you wanted in that wall, then measured the size you cut, and then cut the patch to fit it perfectly. So I'm going to start cutting it, right? You want to double check, triple check what's behind that wall. Do you see the black line? There's also an electrical line back there. So stick your hand behind it so you can push those items back so you don't cut through it. I can't stress that enough. You will be so sad if you cut through something. Here again, I quickly check behind with my hand, make sure I'm not going to cut anything.
I'll sneak by when you're ready.
Oh, go ahead.
Is that okay?
And again, I stick my whole arm in there to see if there's any hidden extras, water lines. I mean, there's always stuff behind a wall. Always triple, double check what the frick's in that wall. I think I may have said it, but ideally I like to go stud to stud. That way I don't have to waste extra money adding backing. However, I didn't need to. I could have cut out a much smaller hole and just added wood backing, and that would have served the exact same purpose. I could have made a smaller repair probably for this one. Here I'm just shaving off about 1/4 of an inch. I cut it a little too large. When you make a very small cut like this, you want to score it fairly deep. That way it cracks nice and you can take it off. It'll just crumble if you don't score it very deep. I know I keep repeating myself, but just repetitiveness is just the best. Again, we're doing 2 repairs on this video. So now I'm just adding screws to both sides of this drywall, the new side and the old existing drywall. That way everything's sandwiched against those studs really tightly. And just honestly, the more screws probably the better in this situation. I mean, not crazy, but every couple inches. And that way everything just is firm and there's no cracking. Now we're starting for prep pre-fill. So here I'm cutting off a small triangle on all the edges to get rid of any bumpy or loose or damaged drywall. So everything is a nice, clean triangle cut. When using a blade like this and kind of doing a power cut, a deep forceful cut, I like to try to use both hands on the knife. That way if it slips, it's not going to slip into that other hand. And I generally do this technique when I'm kind of doing a power cut or just a very forceful cut. Any small areas that you can't cut, you can just bang in like that. You don't want anything sticking out of the wall. You want everything inside of the wall. That way when you mud it, it covers those inside areas. Here, just adding a few more screws. I start tapping the drywall everywhere, and I always do this on patches because you're looking for loose areas. Anything that makes like a hollow noise or obviously moves or wiggles needs more screws. So just try that technique. The moment you've all been waiting for, pre-fill. This is so important. Firstly, I use quick set mud for all my repairs. This does two things. Obviously, I can get the repair done in a day, which is obviously nice because I'm a business trying to make money. And secondly, it hardens like concrete. It hardens so hard that cracking and repairs, it's a stronger repair. Now pre-fill, I globbed it on there, right? Really heavy and ugly. And then I am just firmly wiping it. So there is nothing on the wall. It is just inside those cracks. See how the cracks are basically gone now? Doesn't need to look pretty, that's okay. As long as those cracks are basically filled. On all repairs or potentially damaged drywall, you want to use meshed tape. I like the yellow because I can see it, but they make a blue, a white, I'm sure they make all sorts of colors. But the reason you do this because mesh tape is less likely to bubble. Paper tape can't breathe. So if there's air pockets, they can come through that mesh tape and not bubble during the drying process. I have personally found when I go to cover the tape for the very first layer that those stupid corners give me the most trouble. They always come undone or fall off the wall and piss me off. So I just take nice globs and I just hit every corner. That way they can't come off because they're pinned to the wall. So that's why I did that first. You don't have to though. So here again, this is my first finishing coat. And I'm not really trying to fill anything, make anything look pretty. I'm just basically trying to cover that tape so it goes away. I am feathering the outside edges. Now I'm feathering the inside edges, right? See how nice those look? Now I'm hitting the middle. Now I'm taking the middle down basically to the tape. I want to see the tape again. I'm not trying to cover the tape up. You're not going to get this in one coat. So see how I can see my tape? We're going to keep wiping it because the tape is the high point of this repair. So you don't want to make the high point any higher than it has to be because that's how you see a repair on the wall and you don't want to see that. So the middle needs, or the tape middle needs to be as low as possible. I'm a little OCD, or I don't know, I hate that word, but I don't do any sanding until the very end. So I try to get every layer fairly smooth so I don't have to do any sanding. Again, I'm a business and I'm trying to make money. I'm not here to waste my time on additional sanding between layers. See how we still can see the tape? That is basically perfect for the first coat. Moving to the second repair. Oh, you can see the other one on the wall there. All right, so exact same thing. Pre-fill, I like to take the edge and wipe it up like that. I just find it the easiest. We're just globbing it on, nothing. It doesn't need to look pretty right this second. Just globbing it on real heavy. And then we're gonna wipe it really tight. Oh, there was a small little ding on the wall there. See how we're just wiping it really tight. The top there in the top right, see how it's kind of bulbed out a little bit? That was a good one there. See on the top? That's okay because that's just pre-fill, okay? When that dries, it'll either shrink in or we'll kind of tap it in. But that's perfect for pre-fill. That is a perfect pre-fill. When I have a repair like this close to baseboard, I just float it just a little above the baseboard, maybe, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch. I don't have it touch the baseboard. That way I have a little room because you don't want to see that tape, obviously. Start with my corners again because they always seem to want to fight me. I mean, it's basically the same technique as we did before, but because I'm close to the baseboard, it's just a little bit harder to wipe, so I hold my knife, I mean, not really the right way, but it's just kind of harder to hold it the right way when we're that close to the ground and then close to baseboard. But really what we do is, so I'm just kind of kneading the mud down to the baseboard, but we're going to feather the edges first, and I do that here in just a moment. See how we feathered this? I'm just taking mud off the edge of the patch there, right? And then I'm going to feather the middle. See how we're just taking it off the new piece, and then we're going to wipe the middle. This is the best way to do it. And again, this is the first finishing coat, so I'm taking it back down so I can see the tape just a little bit. Basically, the tape is covered. You can just see the yellow through it. I generally use a 20-minute quickset mud. I sometimes use 5-minute if it's a smaller repair. But anyway, I gave it about 23 minutes to dry, and then I'm moving on to my second finishing coat. I stick my knife up to the wall, the middle of the tape, and I see how much fill there is to do. If there's any light, here's a good example here. See how we have a little wiggle, light on both sides. That means the middle of the tape is a high point. So you want to put mud on either side of that. There is a little bit different technique on figuring out which side of that tape needs more mud, but that's probably for another video or an advanced video. But basically, to sum it up, if there is wiggle in that knife when you put it on the wall, it means it needs mud on either side of the tape to hide the high point, because you don't want to see a high point on the wall when you're done with the repair, because then you'll know that there was a repair there. So again, this is the second finishing coat. I kind of globbed the mud on the wall. I put more mud in the areas that needed a thicker fill. But again, this is just the second finishing coat. I'm going to do plenty of other finishing coats. So I don't need the fill to be 100% filled. So this one just doesn't need to be perfect. So globbed it on, wiping it on there. Always feather the edges first, right? The outside edges first. Keep checking our fill, right? And then we kind of wipe in the middle and just kind of smooth everything out to get it ready for the next fill. This particular patch, when I keep checking my fill, my head gets in the way, so I'm just going to apologize now and I mean, it happens throughout the whole video, so sorry that you can't see the fill. On this one, it's a little better, and you can see the fill and the needs of the fill a lot better. See how that's basically flat? That one needs a little bit of a fill, and that one needed a little bit of a fill. So I'm using my 10-inch knife. This is a smaller knife. When I do my final finishing coats, I use a 12-inch knife. It is the largest personal knife that I use. I know there's a 14, or I'm sure there's every size knife. But I generally use a 6, a 10, and a 12. So I use the 10 here for generally my second finishing coat. I didn't say it on the other patch. So again, here, we're trying to wipe it so the middle of the tape is as tight as possible down to the tape. Unless the fill requires differently, but again, that's probably for an advanced class. But that tape is generally the high point. So you don't want to add more mud on the high point, only as much as you have to add to complete the repair, right? So you always, generally speaking, have the tape where you want to re-wipe it. So you basically, I'm sure if you look close enough, you still could see the tape. And I'm doing that on purpose. Gave this about 20 minutes to dry, and I'm moving on with my third finishing coat. This, I'm using my 12-inch knife, and I will continue to use my 12-inch knife probably for the rest of the job. Checking my fill, see that light in there? Those are the fill, right? So we want to put mud where the light was seen when you put your knife up to the wall. And this particular patch, the new piece of drywall was indented more, so the new whole piece of drywall just needs a ton of mud to fill that fill. So that's why I globbed it just in the middle. I will feather the outside later. If you notice, I do lots and lots of wipes with my knife. When I do a new wipe, when I'm starting a new wipe across the patch, it's best to start the wipe off of the fresh mud. So that way you don't make a line in the mud. And that'll make sense if you have ever done one single patch. But you want to start off the mud and then wipe into it. And that'll make a really nice wipe. Always be very mindful of where the largest fills need is, right? So I do lots of wipes on this. So when you wipe your knife, you want to put more or less pressure where the fills are, right? So if a huge fill, you don't want to put lots of pressure there because then you'll wipe out all that mud and all that fill. Because the middle of this repair needed so much mud, that's why I kind of did the middle first, wiped it fairly smooth, and now I'm doing the outside of the patch. It's just easier that way, so I didn't mess up my fill. You could have, for a beginner, you could have just done the middle like that, let the whole thing dry, and then done the outside like this. That might be easier for you. I've just done a million patches, so I am okay to work with wet mud on top of wet mud. I know I've repeated it, but it is worth repeating a million times. Keep checking your fill. You don't want to be adding mud where it does not need it. If mud isn't needed there, don't add mud. So right there in that particular area needed quite a bit of mud, so that's why I keep going back to it. Keep checking your fill, putting your knife up there. If you've created a high point, now with the wet mud is your opportunity to wipe it off so it doesn't dry that way, and then you have a crappy patch. Working on top of wet mud is very difficult because I've already done this area and I put more mud on top of it, right? So for a beginner, it's okay to let it dry and then do an additional patch. This is kind of 2 layers in one that I've done. On every layer before you add any mud, check the need of the fill. If it does not need mud, do not add mud. So we have it all on there. Now I'm wiping the edge of the patch. If you notice, I'm bending my knife and feathering that edge. I don't like to sand. I don't want to sand until the very end. So feathering is the best technique to make it so you don't have to sand and have a beautiful repair, right? So you always feather the edges first, then hit your middle. And we're taking that middle down to as close as that tape as we want. This is the 3rd finishing coat, so I doubt we'll see the tape anymore. But we're just getting it as close to that tape or the high point as possible, so we have a flat wall. Gave that about 20 minutes to dry, and we're back for the 4th and final fill of the job. But the point is to make it flat. So if you need a 5th or 6th fill coat, then you do it. But this one just needed 4, and then we do a 5th topping coat. Checking the fill, what are my needs? That right side of the patch is the largest of the needs, but the others just do need a little bit of a fill, mostly in the middle. I mix this quick set mud from a powder, so that's why you notice when I first start a fill, the mud on the wall seems a little bit grady or chunky, and I just don't care because as I wipe it, it will kind of mix itself a little bit. I do use a paddle and an electric gun outside to mix it. I've just done this so many times that, you know, I can save myself a couple of minutes from keep mixing outside, because it's going to just mix itself on the wall as I wipe. Each wipe that I do, I am paying attention where my fills are. These aren't just random wipes, right? Where's my fill and why am I wiping there? Can you guess what the first step is? You got it. Check the fill. This one is just about there. It does need a tiny bit on the top. I have personally noticed that quickset doesn't take to paint very well. So I always use topping compound. It's at Home Depot. Just a finishing mud. This is a regular, takes forever dry mud. But I do such a thin layer and I have bunches of fans, so I still can have it done in a day. Here I basically don't need any fills. I'm just kind of getting a thin layer of this on the wall so it can cover the whole patch for painting purposes. With this final topping finishing coat, I want there to be 0 lines, 0 wrinkles, and the wipes to be perfect. So when I go to sand, I have to do very little of it with very little effort. I hate sanding. Sanding is annoying, and you should also feel that way. I guess I never mentioned, this is a flat wall with no texture. If there was texture, like a Holy Smooth or Santa Fe or something like that, I would be adding the texture with the topping coat. So Holy Smooth is very popular out here, so I would use that technique here. If it were orange peel, I would be doing this exact same thing, getting a flat wall, and then I would spray the orange peel on top of it. Oh, here I identified a very small fill needed for the topping coat. And if it's a very small fill, topping coat is fine to do that. Really, you're just worried about the dry time because you don't want to be here all day because you have other patches to get to. If you notice, I'm in a different outfit, which is kind of a bummer because this is a different day. When I was done with the finishing coat, I get with the customer to get the paint because they wanted me to paint, which I rarely do, and he couldn't find it, so he asked for me to come back the next day to paint. This is a huge reason I don't like to paint, plus the paint never matches, which this one didn't anyway. Anyway, so it's just kind of a bummer. This was a 2-day patch, but I'm only here like 30 minutes this day. If you take a light, hold it against the wall, and at an angle, you can see beautifully all the imperfections and all the sanding that is required. And if you noticed, I do very, very little sanding. Because sanding, to me, is just so frustrating and annoying. So I try to make perfect wipes, so I have as little sanding as possible. When sanding, the absolute, complete, most critical part about sanding is you have to get the edges. In this case, where the brown and white meet, right? The edge of the patch. That is a step, and it has to be feathered perfectly so you do not see the repair. You do not want to see a step there, because then you'll be like, oh, somebody did a patch there. And you don't want that. So the most sanding on any repair is on the edges. On certain textures, this isn't as critical, like Holy Smooth, you can hide it pretty well. Especially ceilings, you can hide this very well, so you don't necessarily need it as much. But on a flat wall, it is OMG critical. All right, the drywall repair is complete. Now I am painting. I am not going to give any tips on painting. I am a terrible painter, and if a professional painter is watching this, you can rip me a new one, all you would like. I don't like painting. I just did it to be a nice guy because they needed this completed. Normally, I ask the customer to probably paint the entire wall so the color matches perfectly, and to use the right stipple for the roller. But anyway, I'm not a painter, but I'm just trying to be a nice fella here. Here in a few minutes, I'm done painted with the entire job, and I kind of do a step back video of it. And yes, you can see the paint is just a barely shade off, and you can still see that, but just this is a drywall video. So pay attention to the steps and how the drywall portion is perfect. There's a few minutes of painting, so I will just throw on some crappy music so you cannot be bored. Wasn't that music terrible? I hope you found this video entertaining and learned quite a lot. I know this was like a freaking hour, but if you watched the drywall portions or even go back and watch it a million times, you too can be a master at drywall. I am a complete 100% pro at any patch, and you can be too. Watch all of my videos, and honestly, you can do this just for a hole in your house, or you can make a ton of money doing it. I make, I don't know, 180, 200,000 a year, and I'm not even kidding, doing this kind of stupid work. And the prices I charge, honestly, are probably below what other people charge. So please like this video, share it with your friends, and comment about something you have learned or something you would like to learn, and I can show you how to make a ton of money. Look at that, perfect. I always leave the job with a fresh vacuum, so don't complain about the dust on the carpet.